Okay, so just to recap, this is Eco Village Talks, episode 5 with Amena, and we are here to talk about the inner eco village, inner regeneration. And Amena, I'll just repeat my question so those who are watching after the live show can follow along. So we have the Eco Village Design Education, which covers 4 areas of regeneration, which we have mostly been using as an external guidance on how to design a community, a project, or how to think about regeneration. And today we're turning that inwards and looking at how the original Eco Village Design Education idea was come about and how you've arrived at this inner eco village idea. So please, can you share a little bit about how we got here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Na, for that. Um, so eco-villaging, I think for all of us, we recognize that it is not just the ecology aspect of the village or the community. It is a space that we all wish to inhabit through understanding that the word eco really has its origins in the feeling of home and interconnectedness. And the eco-village movement actually started as this space where we wanted to interconnect all the spaces in our world that were feeling this impulse of this earth worldview. And the worldview of that the earth is a living being and that we are all spiritual living beings. And the inner spaces are very important to tend to the outer spaces, cultivating the sacred garden within, as we experienced in our attunement and meditation, is key to cultivating the outer spaces. And the EDE program, which all of you in Gaia Ashram right now joining on land are part of, was birthed actually as this understanding. And one of our co-founders, Hilda Jackson, the wife of Ross Jackson, who was the founder of GEN 30 years ago, as we spoke in the beginning, and we celebrate our 30 years this year, was very keen that we bring this new consciousness of living together in service to the earth and our spirit, and that we create beautiful harmony in community through this understanding. So the EDE came about as this multi-dimensional experience from the grassroots communities, re-enlivening the indigenous way of being, but also bringing in some new modern ideas that could create thriving communities and a nourishing planet. So for me personally, I think now when you asked me, right, when did I come upon this feeling of the inner eco-village? I think the seed of the inner space was in me for a very, very long time. Like I said, these seeds we carry in the soil of our heart. And it was about 20 years ago when I was working as a designer, not as a EDE or a permaculturist designer, but a really mainstream interior designer. And something inside me called me to name that business Inner Space. And at that time, this was about 2005, I didn't really know that, 20 years later, I would be stewarding this movement. And from the design place 20 years ago, doing interior design, which was in India, I moved to the Philippines. And it was in the Philippines that I recognized that this whole idea of the Heart Sutra, I also wrote about it in one of my stories, that for me, the Philippines was the space like the heart chakra. And the heart really, flowered or broke open where the whole cosmos could reside in it. And from there, I got into permaculture design, started a permaculture farm with a very dear friend of mine. And that's when eco-villaging came into my consciousness, as we wanted to grow our farm into a larger community and inviting more people into a web of life. So, and I've always recognized that the work that I do or channel today is because for me, the most precious and the most nourishing part is tending to the inner garden. And I put a lot of time, energy, effort into this healing consciousness, healing with my inner spaces and ecosystems, so that whatever's created in our movement outside also blossoms with that same energy of having this sacred feeling of our interconnectedness.
I feel like it's the connection to nature, right? This is like one of the things, it's a connection that's not tangible. And for me, that's how it started for me. You know, that's the seed that was planted. It wasn't just me, it was more about the other beings outside of me. So actually let's ask everybody. So everyone in Gaia Ashram and everyone here, we wanted to ask, and what is your interpretation of the inner eco village and what role is that playing in your life right now? And I invite everyone to have a little reflection and then share in the chat or share with Kin, and maybe Kin can share some of those reflections. Okay. So how do you see your inner eco village and what role is it playing inside your life? And Amena, if you can maybe share a little bit about how this is coming now at this time, at this moment, how it's really, because I feel it too, as we talked about earlier, how this is now coming out more. And I think we can also refer back to Hilda and her original interpretation of those 4 areas of regeneration.
Yes. So when Hilda Jackson and the circle that was imagining this new world, imagining the EDE, and looking at the Earth worldview, the Earth at the center of all, and they designed the 4 dimensions around the 4 elements: Earth, water, fire, and air and space. And Hilda, in her book Cultivating Harmony, which I think a lot of you might wish to read, mentioned this vision, and I will read from her vision for you today, so that we remember why this inner space, the spiritual dimension, the spiritual worldview, the Earth worldview, is so essential and inseparable from our movement and our need to live in community for its success. So I'm reading from the vision of Hilda, and she wrote, "The vision is to honor the cycles of nature and live as beautifully and in as dignified a way as possible with them. To respect the soil, the plants, the animals, and our fellow human beings in an earth-centered worldview, to follow the pulse of life. It is at the same time a spiritual worldview honoring physical matter and mind, which are born of the divine. We are both cosmic and earthly beings, and there is no contradiction in this. Contact with divine love is our natural inheritance. Matter itself is nothing more than a different external form of the mind. And mind and matter are both manifestations of spirit. But we are here in physical form to learn to understand this unique level of external manifestation, to live with it and to live with it gracefully. So just coming back to your inquiry, Anna, about why this is relevant now, and in my own experience of embodying this inner eco village and growing it into spaces that I visit every time, the reason really being very simple. We know that everything, as Hilda said, everything is matter, matter is energy, and the energy we bring, that energy determines the sustainability and the regeneration quotient of that place or what you create. And from my inner experience, anything that comes from soul and heart is sustainable eternally. And I feel in the eco-village movement, we've had these 2 phases and these 3 decades where we built the networks, we built the communities, the eco-villages, the engagements, the connections, the experiences, and we have honored the 4 dimensions, as you're also, I think, studying the worldview, those in Gaia Ashram. So there's the social and the cultural and the economic and the worldview. And my wish personally is that we, in the next wave, we start tending to the inner dimension more. We create a separate EDE, as I think IDE, as Na suggested, the inner design for eco-villages, as inspired also by the IDGs, right? There's a whole new movement in the world today called the Inner Development Goals, because a lot of people in the West recognize that the SDGs are absolutely unattainable because humans are not doing enough inner work. And change in behavior is critical. And what are the skills and capacities do we need in our inner realms to be able to collaborate radically to create a more sustainable, regenerating world? So coming back to, I think a lot of us who are EDE programmers, facilitators, we need to carry the wisdom of our elders and revisit it. And I think human evolution and consciousness is at a place where the language of the heart and the language of the spirit now will be received much better, because people are recognizing that what the heart knows today, the mind, or what the heart feels today, the mind will know tomorrow, right? So let's create spaces for that and feed back into this EDE curriculum, which is a living system. And we need to, go back into our living systems and redefine them. And the journey begins within, because we are that atom of that system.
Mm. And it's foundational, right? I think most people who have studied any part of the ED or any part of systems theory, the main difference between those ethnicities that are still connected deeply to nature and that protect large areas of our natural habitat, they're very different worldview. It's foundational to how they see the world and how their actions manifest in the world. When you see yourself as part of nature, part of this system, one tiny part in this giant ecosphere, you are less likely to harm another being or to destroy something or to extract or to pollute, because you understand that you're part of one system. And although you're a tiny part, you're an important part. And the whole system needs to stay in balance, and it needs us to act, in a way. I remember reading somewhere, the person who is protecting a tree is just nature protecting itself, because we're all part of the same system. And I really feel in the last few years that that message has been more broadcast and also better received in the mainstream. And what you were saying about, or what Hilda was saying, as well as physical reality is energy, it's also being proven now by quantum physics, right? There's been a lot of papers published recently that's catching up with what the spiritual leaders have been saying for centuries. So, what we think is like a theory or a magic or some sort of myth is slowly being proven true by quantum physics. So I think, like you said, this is a point in our culture that we are more able to speak openly about spirit, about connection, and about understanding the importance of that foundation as we move through the world.
This reminds me of now recently I was at Navdanya. Navdanya is the farm of Dr. Vandana Shiva. I think we all in the movement know her. And every year she hosts a course at her Earth University called Triple Peace. And it's co-facilitated by Satish Kumar, from Schumacher and from many other books, and his whole philosophy of radical love and peace. And he has one very simple human idea in life. He says, the earth is my home and my nationality is nature. My country is the cosmos and my religion is love. And for me, I just alter it a bit. And my religion is loving regeneration. And regeneration is a word I think a lot of us are using in the movement now. It's become a buzzword. A lot of us are questioning it. A lot of us are saying, maybe it should be localization, maybe it should be, something else. But I feel when you look at the resonance of the word regeneration and you feel it, it's like this generating growth for goodness, right? It's continuously doing no harm, but also following the cycles of life. And we know that in nature, decay and growth and everything happens together, and light and dark have to coexist. But yes, coming back to this idea of the sacred web of life, and how can we as this community nurture it every day. And the nurturance really begins with the inner eco villages. I have been to eco villages and communities which are, externally seemingly doing really well, but at a community level, I also feel they are being under-resourced, and there is no sustainability of community because people are getting too stretched or worn out by the external pressures, not just of climate change, but also a lack of prioritization of the inner spaces. And so for me, I would recommend when we do work in a village, when we work together as a community, at least 1/3 of the day should go into practices that cultivate inner presence, connections, interbeingness, mindfulness, and everything else that keeps us centered in emotional stability, helps us create psychological safety for others, helps us expand our creativity to imagine a different world. Because if we are coming from this space of, not having energy, being worn out, being stressed, irritable, angry, frustrated, coming from deficit, we are going to continuously create the matter that has that energy. So if matter has to be different, then the energy has to be different. And yeah, and we have such great traditions, especially in the East, right? For so many wisdom traditions that have given us so many tools to take care of the sacred garden and to
Yeah.
actually become the Tao. So for very long, when I was, going through my journey, I was meditating on what is this feeling of the Tao and how can we bring it to communities and education and spaces that need a systemic shift. And if we all become the Tao in some ways, which is the inner eco village, then I think there is a lot of promise for a beautiful world.
Mm. I'm thinking about some of the people here who maybe are not so familiar with the Tao, or maybe if we could give a little bit more detail on what some of these inner eco-village features might be, so we can draw out some of the practices and some of the examples maybe that we've seen, both you and I, and maybe even other people in Gaia education, Gaia Ashram.
Yes, so I'm actually very keen to have a circle conversation from somebody from a Gaia ashram. I don't know if Om is there today or not, because I feel that Gaia ashram embodies a lot of these, right? They are completely into deep ecology, and that's at the forefront of all their work. And it is an ashram and a space to cultivate, the inner spirit. And and they have the whole Buddhist mindfulness way of life, which is about getting to know yourself and the world outside. And for me, I don't know how they receive in Gaia Ashram, how they receive the essence of the Tao, but through the I Ching and other traditions from the East, it's just this sensation for me of being a vessel of the truth that is the creative force. And once you have had that feeling once of being this vessel, and you're holding natural laws in your body as an embodied feeling. And when the natural law is being violated, your body is in dissonance. It's not in resonance with wellness and connectedness, and there's separation. And the Tao is very, very unseen, unheard, and is when it's in nature, it only exposes itself or reveals itself to those who have that inner capacity to hold it. But it's a cultivation. That's a cultivation of the mind. So to listen to the principles of the Tao, or to read the I Ching, and then to see that when you do work in eco villages, or maybe even in Gaia Ashram, when you go on a nature walk, or when you go into a community, where are you seeing the play of the Tao? So you have to have your inner intuitive witness self very alive, because there's a material world, but to have a sense of the energy is the Tao at play or is there imbalance? When the Tao is not at play, there will be imbalance.
Mm.
So anybody wishing to join this conversation uh, from the ashram would be really nice.
So Alma's just stepped out for a second. So we're asking Gaia Ashram participants to ask some questions. Anyone in the online Zoom room, you can raise your physical hand or your Zoom hand, might be easier so I can see if you have something to say. But I just wanted to respond to something you said there. This is something I've commonly seen, burnout, what you're speaking to of not having the inner resources or working from a place where we're not fully resourced and we're not able to rest in our heart space and in our compassion because I feel, and I felt this a lot in a lot of the projects I've been working in, there's this sense of urgency and there is a sense of kind of if I don't do it, something bad's going to happen. If I don't do it, something, no one else will. And I really think that comes from the mainstream mindset, like internalized capitalism, that if you're not doing something active, it's not actually contributing. But I think, as you've already spoken to, it's actually not the truth. And we need rest as part of the cycle. We need inspiration. We need that connection. Yeah, and I think that echoes very strongly in the spaces where we haven't been able to do that, then we haven't been able to act, in true alignment with nature. I can see are you wanting to join the conversation?
So nice to see you.
I was with you. I was watching online.
Okay. Okay.
Trying to get people on Facebook to ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that is so important because I think apart from regenerating the abundance of the natural worlds, our beautiful cultures, we also need to look at the potentials of our own life as a person, as a human being. I think like it's also something beautiful about it that we need to think about, that want us to make it nurtures. It's not only the beautiful world around us we want to create, we also want to be able to see ourselves as a beautiful thing in that world. So I think it's important to ask ourselves questions and then looking deeply, what makes us feel like, wow, the earth would be proud to have us here. I mean, so I think that is giving us a chance of think deeply, look deeply, and find ways and learn from different traditions, different knowledge and insight to be able to ask ourselves, to give ourselves a little bit of a journey into that deeply inside of us. So I think it's important task as much as the task of regenerating the world around us for us to be able to live. And if we are able to live, then forward. So I think that also a beautiful thing to think about, how can we regenerating inside of us the kind of self-perception that make us feel deeply connected, deeply belong here and now in this moment. I think that's probably one of the most beautiful things we could regenerate at a deeper level.
Thank you all. I wonder, Alma, Amina, either of you can share what has done that for you, like what experiences or what practices have brought you further along this path.
You asking me or Amina? But okay, right.
Go ahead.
I learned from many traditions. I also learned from Buddhism, Taoism, shamanism, animism, all kind of sim. Just because the more I learned, the more it give me more this bigger hope that there are so much more to learn. There's so much treasures. There's so much mysteries, because all those what I learned is maybe give the path, but it doesn't all give the absolute answers, which is every time discovering new paths, discovering new potentials, and then you realize that the potential is just go greater and greater. And I'm learning from many different parts. So I am personally now I am into Taoism and practicing to Tai Chi, which is helping me to understand about myself as part of nature, to experiencing the flow of energy. That is everything flow to us, come from the ground, go back to the ground. All the action, intention are all energy that passing through. And when the energy passing through us, we contributing to that aliveness of the energy with the consciousness, with the mindfulness, with the love and compassion. And we pass through us and it's carry on. So energy itself is also grow as we are contributing to its soul. So that's how I see it. And so that helped me to be able not just to hold on to things, but just allowing things to flow through. And so the busy day don't get too heavy, because I don't let it go. So that
Yes.
help a lot in the day-to-day.
Yes, lovely, lovely, Om. I was, wondering, I didn't see you on the screen, so I was wondering why I'm speaking about Taoism and what part of the universe wants us to talk more about it.
Yeah.
Because it's your current lived experience, right? Becoming the flow and the energy,
Yeah.
and that space of what from inaction, but leading to some sort of action, but from the inactive place of silence and stillness, and seeing the unseen. And for me personally also, like Om, I've had so many different journeys, because the vast body of knowledge is absolutely, I think for us as humans to reach there, one needs a lot of rigor. And in the early years of my, I guess, seeking and, really finding answers, I used to read a lot, and I went through so many different cultures, traditions, spaces. But today I've just come home to this feeling of myself as a healer. And I feel that this space for me is very complete and whole. And I've come to this understanding that if we can channel this energy of, like what Om said, of goodness and compassion and peace and bliss and kindness, and just be a vessel for it, that's all that's needed, at least for me, the seed that is me now and is blossoming. And so I very actively use a lot of different healing practices, and which I've been learning and practicing for about 15 years now. And some of these are the practices of Reiki. So if any of the people here are from Japan, they might know that. And it's just so, it's the most nourishing fertilizer, I would say, or the most renewable source of energy that we have available from the universal life force. And then there are other modalities that are more from India, from my master here, Renuji, like, my golden cloud energies. And then there is the karma quotient, which talks a lot about Akashic records and what are we here as human beings? What have we accumulated? How do we, unpattern ourselves? Because a lot of the human collective behavior is about looking at our patterns, understanding them, and then finding that technology, that supreme technology to delete those patterns and rewrite new patterns of nurturance. And yeah, so it's this toolkit, and my invitation to everybody listening today is that keep growing this toolkit, keep experiencing spaces that give you time for inner regeneration. And yes, some of us are still in the mainstream world where we have to keep going for some reason that we don't really know, because we believe that we have to Yeah, the material world is all that is going to keep us secure. So one day at a time, making more and more time for the unseen. But do it in lightness and do it in fun and games and community and art and expression, and like you do your dances of universal peace. Have you had some of those circles there already, Om?
Yes,
At the
several
okay.
times, right?
Yes. So
Led by
that's
King and Note.
beautiful. I mean, that's such an important gift to the inner regeneration space beyond language. Hmm? Yeah, yeah.
We also had dances of universal peace here in Chiang Mai recently from some of the dance leaders that came back from Vietnam. So that was so beautiful to share. For those who aren't aware, dances of universal peace is a very beautiful and gentle community dance practice. And you are dancing and singing, but that's not really what you're doing. It's what you're doing, but it's not what you're doing. The only thing you're doing. The thing is the connection and this kind of collective energy gathering in a circle. So there'll be more of that in Thailand next year. This year, 2025. So we will share some more about that. And I'm glad you said art, Amina, because that's how I personally connect to that energy is through color and paint. And I didn't know that's what I was doing, but that's what I do, and that's how I really feel that spirit kind of connection for me is really regenerating. That is the thing. If I'm tired or sick, that's what I do. So there's a million ways to access it, and everyone has a different tapestry, I guess, of how their life has got to this point and the things that work. And I'm also a great believer in synchronicity. So if you meet someone, or if you, like you said, Amina, there's the reason why Taoism is coming up. So there's a reason, there's a little nudge from the universe of that, oh, what about this? What about this? And you can follow. If you stay open and stop planning, we can follow those strings that the nature and the universe leaves out for us.
Yes, and in I think in this wave of the eco-village movement, it's believed that it's going to be carried forward by the arts. We have to sing and dance and paint our way into the future. It might seem, quite unbelievable to people who are not here in our space today, but I think slowly we will gather momentum. Mm.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thought. I'm going to open up and ask if anyone has any questions or anything they'd like to share from Gaia Ashram. You can stick your hand in the air from online.
Yes, anything that's, alive, any feeling, any contribution. Because just remembering Joanna Macy, and, she would say this web of life, this body of knowledge, this circle of hope and going forward has to keep growing. And each one of us is carrying a seed to grow it. Each one of us is carrying the puzzle to complete that artwork for the future. So please, yes, inviting you and feel comfortable to just share maybe one word, what's happening, how are you thinking, processing our conversation, because this is meant to be our larger circle. I can see Kai coming there. Nice to see you. Yes. Hey, Kai.
Wait,
There we go.
hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Nice to see you, Amina.
Yes.
Yeah, so listening to you and Om, just I guess, and my own continuous question is, so I think when I got socially engaged, the phrase that stuck with me is don't just sit there, do something. Because there are people suffering.
Mm.
And then after I met Thich Nhat Hanh at Plum Village, his one phrase they use there is don't just do something, sit there. So sometimes I can find the flow to play with those, but often I feel kind of stuck, like, okay, I can't just go do something, but I also can't just sit here. And I particularly feel that with like trying to live an alternative life and build a community, because there is a lot of work and somebody needs to, or maybe somebody doesn't need to do it, but I want the vision to happen. And so I don't practically see just really spending most of my time doing inner work actually manifesting a garden that feeds me. So I see the connection because I practice both, but I think that is kind of the challenge, and sometimes I mean, since you were talking about Taoism, it's like really the way, but until you can lean into the way, it is, I feel like both me and many people get stuck in the, like, I want to just get stuff going so I can feed myself and not have to work for money. And at the same time, just going won't get you to the place you actually want to go. And so I don't have a clear question or answer. It's just, I feel like that's where many of us get to, where it's like, how do you juggle all these things, and where is the change that needs to happen, because your systems also affect you, which is, partly external. Like community meetings and how often to have them, and what do you do in your community meetings are, they have a major impact on your inner eco-village. And your inner eco-village has a major impact on the outer eco-village. So yeah, that's what I often sit with, is just the complexity, and sometimes you just get lost in the, how much time do I spend where, and is it really going to work, and am I doing the right thing? So yeah, that's just kind of what came up for me.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
Yes.
I just been contemplating on this teaching by Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu? Lao Tzu. I can't even pronounce my master name. And he's teaching us, when nothing is done, nothing is left undone. So which is like, how do you, which is, I take it as like, you're still engaging, but also as if you're not engaging. It is like you're doing as if you're not doing. But how I understand this is the way. When you become one with the way, it is like the flow of natural way. You become part of the way. So it is like, is it not really like you're putting the effort to make things happen? So things happen, but is it not you doing it? And nothing left undone. This is how I try to understand. Doesn't mean that I enlighten to his teaching, but I want to share that how taking in a teaching or a path could be integrated into answering all these questions for ourselves, of how are we engaging, even for creating change or making an eco-village. So I think like I just want to respond as I have a similar question. And then I take in the teaching that I follow to just trying to figure out also what that it means, where I could find my balance of the sense of being sitting in peace all the time. But it is not just sitting, the sitting that is not just sitting, or the doing that it seems like sitting. Anyway, it's go to wake now. I'm just saying, like it is worth exploring to be able to find that connection between the inner and the outer. Having many ways to guide, to explore could be helpful. That is just a way, I think.
Yes. Thank
I
you.
think space for contemplation is so important. And maybe that is an easier way to understand a pause, right? And it doesn't mean outwardly you look like you're maybe not doing anything, but contemplating or contemplative practices can really help us to find clarity or to think, not think, to feel something through. But like Kai, you said, you can't just sit there and just expect your garden to grow. It inspires action, right? But right action. So the contemplation and then the action that follows. And it comes back to the elements, right? It's like you feel into it, you visualize it, you bring the fire and passion into it, and then you ground it into earth and do something. No one of those elements works without the others. We have to kind of move through all of them.
Thank you, Nai. Anybody from the circle feeling what Kai is feeling? I'm in that space very often, Kai, and I can only speak from my lived experience and how I approach it at different times with different engagements. It's a different response. But while you were speaking, I was thinking about, this forest of people and us as single trees, right? And it seems that nothing is really happening with that one tree or with the forest. And there's the mycelium, the water cycles, and all of that. And if we come back to the understanding, we're part of that. Somewhere we've been programmed by modern education that the doing is only when you're out there, with your hands or creating things. But traditionally, ancients knew that even thoughts and feelings is the doing. And how I sometimes invite this space and let it rest is I actively use the healing spaces to heal the thought. Should I be doing? Should I be sitting? What is the difference between allowing or just being lazy? And when I go through my healing practices, whether it's Reiki channeling to myself, to that moment, to that situation, to that garden, then it's just not me as the tree, but the whole forest, the web of life comes alive to guide me into what is smart action, where you do little, but the impact is a lot. And me as that one tree, as a seed, I carry some very unique traits as to others. And I have to find that unique trait that completes the whole. So coming back to what was said in the beginning, for me, the practice is, can I empty myself out before taking the action? So that I know that the action is not actually me, but it's a larger cosmic plan that I am just being played into. And so then, addressing these feelings of impatience and unrest, and so much that we read, are we enough? Are we doing enough? The garden is not going to grow by itself, but if we want to have a self-sustaining garden, it's important for somebody like me to create that community, to bring somebody in who's a master in creating that garden, while I, with my puzzle piece, can support with some other aspects. So I think everyone is here to play a role, and for us to find that clarity, what seed am I? Where do I want to be planted? What ecosystem do I thrive in? What is the weather conditions that make me blossom? And which seasons do I need to incubate? So it all comes back to the Eastern philosophy of the answer lies in self-awareness. And some of us can, when we come into that space every day, we can actually bypass these pyramids of needs, right? Food and money and clothing, because once we find coming back into meditation and having that clarity, I'm trying to remember, I don't know if it was Gandhi or somebody else. Somebody asked him, "You're really busy, and how long do you meditate?" So he said, "The busier I get, the more I meditate." So for me, that's a practice. The minute I see that my nervous system is not synchronized to harmony and balance, and I'm being pulled in too many places, I just retreat. And fortunately, over the years, people have understood me, and they're just wondering, she's doing nothing. She's just like, she's withdrawn. But I'm integrating, I'm rebalancing. There's neuroplasticity of the brain happening, new connections are being formed. Sometimes I'm just lying in shavasana in yoga for 40 minutes and the thing's waiting to happen. Doorbells are ringing, food needs to, but I'm just saying this is me right now, right here. So I think for me, it's that I've really, through my own self-awareness, understood that for me as a seed, this is really crucial to be well. And well-being is the heart of my existence. And if I'm not well, anything that I create in the outside world for a short term might be really okay, seem impactful. But if I'm thinking 7 generations, then is it going to really be valuable? So I'm in that place of really less is more, and just sensing into the future and seeing the possibility. And yeah, so the practices, daily practices, whatever you do, my encouragement would be, to keep expanding into the spaces with great trust, and to know that nature rushes nothing and everything's achieved in the same lines as what Om is saying, right?
Thank you, Amena. Rina, you have your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself and speak? Hello, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank Ken and Amina for inviting me. No, before anything else, I remember this beautiful thought that I picked up some years ago, that music is the space between the notes. So I think it resonates very much with what you have been sharing about, in between doing and not doing. But we live in a life when they say it's all tempo and no duration. So we need more spaces in between the notes, to breathe. And I just, I'm a Waldorf teacher. I don't know if you're familiar with Steiner education. And one of the aspects of our training is called biography work, appreciating your life story. So I'm very alert when people mention dates or years, and I try to situate where was I in my life at the time. So you say that 30 years ago was when Gen was founded. And I was recalling, I said I was supposed to get married that year, but it didn't push through. So and then 20 years later, 2000, no, and then 2005, Amina mentioned that was the time she started searching and looking for ways to find meaning. And that was the year I finished my training as a Waldorf teacher. So, and then I meet Amina like 14 years later on the shores of the Philippines here. So it's just so nice to be part of this community, although I can't really say that I'm representing an ecological community, although I do live on an organic farm. I've been here for the past 5 years, but I'm not really a farmer. I'm fortunate to be living in an organic farm, but I just turned 60 years old last November, and I went to Taiwan. So there's somebody here from Taiwan. It's so nice when you can, connect things and places and experiences, because that was the first destination I had when I started searching for meaning in life. So that was like 36 years ago. And seeing images of Taiwan now is just like, so different from what I remembered, that I said, I want to see the place again. And what Manila is now, with thousands of motorcycles on the streets, was what Taiwan was 36 years ago. But now they have a beautiful public transportation system. And you could sense that there has been, care in keeping a balance with nature. You could see the beautiful forests, both sides of the railways. And 30 years ago also was when I took up woodworking. And it's amazing how things just, I guess go, like a river, it goes underground for a long time, and then it resurfaces at the time when it's meant to be. So it's only now after 30 years that I'm picking up woodworking again. And maybe this is where I can contribute a bit with regeneration. I recently had an exhibit of sculptured charcuterie boards, and it came about because I just met a friend who invited me to her house, and then I saw these planks of wood. So I said, "What are those planks of wood?" They said, they've been there for 10 years. I've been planning to make benches out of them, but it never happened. So suddenly I had this whole stock of wood, to make into beautiful works of art, which I think made people appreciate this wood, which is only used as firewood here in our area, because it's a hard wood that grows fast. So they haven't really seen the value of it. But when, talking about where art can really enliven our imagination and lead us to places of renewal. And, it's ironic that, it's at 60 that I start doing something very physical when I'm supposed, normally that's a time when you do a little bit more, contemplative work or what. But I also take it as a good opportunity to take care of my body, So I'm blessed with not a very sedentary life. Yes. But mainly I just really wanted to thank you for having this chance to be part. I've been asking Kin, is there anybody else? Of course, I know Amina's friend, Carla. Is there anybody else who is a member of your community here in the Philippines? Because I'd love to connect with them. There was one French guy before, but he has left. So it's just, I think, I don't know if you know Jane Fonda, but she was talking about her secret to her aging beautifully. And she's now 88, I think. And she said the most important thing is to have community. And so I just like to thank you for, counting me in. If there's any way I could be of help, I'm just here. So thank you for this gathering. I mean, funny because we didn't have internet connection yesterday. So I had to drive 10 kilometers to town to get an internet connection. And I was trying desperately to get connected because I thought our meeting was yesterday. So I was frantically in touch with Kin, and I said, have you started already? I said, I'm in town. I'm trying to connect through my phone, only to realize it was only today. So that's how excited I was to have this gathering, because it's always been so uplifting to be part of these gatherings. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rina. I'm actually, I have some connections in the Philippines, so I'll connect with you afterwards. And I'm, fingers crossed, going there later this year to visit some of them. So maybe we can, connect there as well. And we have a couple minutes left. I just want to go through some of the messages that we have in the chat. One from Greg, who is in an eco village in northern Thailand, not too far from me. To add to Kai's good question, for a community that has the physical foundation already, but feels deeply uncomfortable around collectively exploring inner worlds, how do we suggest assisting or initiating deep emotional or spiritually rooted communal engagement, one that sees us as more than the worker bees? He says he has not been so successful and has burnt bridges attempting to create this space as it's quite sensitive. That could also be a cultural thing here as well in Thailand. So, Om or Amina, if you have any reflections to share on that, they would be welcome. So, ways to invite that less physical, more internal, more spiritual, emotional space.
Maybe go ahead.
Let's go to Amina first.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking about culturally, contextually right to be in Thailand and to come from a place where it's received in a language that feels like home. And I feel a lot of us bring in practices from other spaces that feel alien to us. Within the eco-village movement and communities, we have a lot of different ways of designing spaces that feel safe and are healing. and systems and processes. So Greg, if maybe, even doing, I don't know if you've done an EDE or not, is about how do you build shared vision? One is in a community. And then how do you hold these processes and systems where you come together in community to do the collective inner work? Just like this, there are a lot of communities in the world where inner work is happening at an individual level and not a collective level. And when we collectively come to nurture the outer realms, then there is no congruence and it leads to a lot of conflict. So, the things around processes and frameworks around mediation, conflict resolution, healing practices, inviting people to embrace their healer self. I feel for me, that's been one of my greatest gifts to the self and places I go to. And so, yes, cultivating that. And also, I think a lot of people who come into community need the healing, right? Because they're transitioning from a very harsh world. And we have to hold this very sensitive space between not preaching too much, but allowing those energies that nurture to blossom in that community. So it's a lot about, not controlling and commanding too much, but trusting and inspiring and finding those playful ways of doing it. And there are different tools that we use in different communities in the eco villages in Gen, and some of them have been documented, and we would be happy to share them with you if you would like to receive them.
And that reminds me, we will gather all of the resources mentioned in this call and we'll put them together and send them out to everyone who's present today. So you have all of those. You have something to share?
Yes. I don't know if it will be useful. I would share our approach, or my approach is that even if not everybody would agree, or not everybody feel comfortable with it, to have this collective, practice together, it's still important to make sure a space is honored for, even if there is only one person who want to do that. But if we create a space, make sure that that one person, that one energy is being respected and honored. I think it may be not too much for the community to accept that. And then if that energy being created as a highly respect, I think it has potential to grow by inspiring others to know that if they need that, they have the space there available. So here, for example, we put the structure, the physical structure as 5:30 to 6:30 is meditation time. Even though nobody come, we say like, this is the sacred hour. So the space should not be disturbed by other activities. At least someone would be still ring the gong to know that this is the sacred hour. Or I myself, when I do my practice, it's not necessary to do here, I can do anywhere. But I think if I do in the space of the sacred space that we design together, and then people see, and then that energy of very persistent, and then eventually at least get people feel comfortable with that, knowing that it's normal. It's a normal thing. It is part of our life as a normal thing, like going up and brush your teeth. It's going up, brush your teeth, meditate, or do whatever that nurture ourselves. It may take some time to people feel awkward, but if even if there is only one person that is like really committed to it and then believing in it, I believe that it will call that energy out. Maybe people think like first time like weird, and then I used to dance alone in the garden at Jamwiset Ashram. They even make fun like, do you need us to take you to hospital? Because I would do whenever I want to. But afterwards, they feel like, okay, that's just the way she is. And then afterward, then it's like, okay, being respected. And then other people, okay, if it's not normal, then maybe I can join too. So I think like even if you cannot make the communal agreement, and at least make a agreement that there will be a space for those who want to. I think it may be that agreement may be not too much to accept for others. It's not something that I think people would resist to it. I believe people who come to the community would not resist to it. They maybe just don't want to be forced into it. And in general, the way I was taught is that we should not force people into this. We should just creating the space that inviting people. So I think that what I try.
Yes, I think it's even in Gen, in our practices, we say that we create systems, but people are more important than the systems. So we have to, I think sometimes conflict arises because we hold on too tightly to the process and the system, and then we forget there's a person who needs our attention. And the most important part of this human regeneration or inner regeneration is regenerating our relationships. And I think in a community, and if we invest in relationships outside of being worker bees, that's what really matters in keeping the community together. Is yeah, and learning from bees, right? I mean, they are supposed to be the most thriving ecosystem that keeps each other together. And I'm always curious about how they work. And I have this KQ dance I do, by the way, Om, just to connect. It's called the Karma Quotient dance or the Knowledge Quest dance. And every day I do it. It's inviting the elements, the 4 elements, the 10 directions, and it works with all the chakras of the body. It works with many, many different things, the earth, the sun, creativity. And I do it wherever I go. I've done it at Gaia Ashram also. And people are just wondering, what is she doing? And it's at the end of it, actually, Greg, you become a bee and you do this little bit of a swirl where you're gathering the nectar, and then you're pollinating spaces with that nectar. And it's all a consciousness, I would say, play, right? How do we make it fun? But it's a very powerful practice. And this also reminds me, I think my heart is still contemplating on Kai's inquiry and his question. And I was reminded of the space of how do we create, nurture relationships with others, with ourselves, with nature, with community, and yet have progress or have this place where our garden is growing. So I was reminded of within the Sikh tradition in India, which is the tradition I come from. We had 10 gurus across 500 years. It's the most recent tradition. And our first guru was Guru Nanak. And he was this spiritualist who said, we need to create a new way of living. So he started a new village in his own way, 500-600 years ago. And he had to farm, but he had acknowledged himself. People had acknowledged himself more like Buddha. And every day he would work on his field, but his mind and his heart was only on one practice. And the practice was his chant to his connection to the source. And that became part of his resonance and his vibration. And it didn't matter what he was doing in the material realm. His mind, his heart and his soul was in that in-between space of just that, I know there's a bigger creation around us and we are here as divine beings. And our greatest service to the world is to acknowledge that we are divine beings and we can share light. So while I'm growing food, if I'm chanting within, if I'm letting the river of light flow through me wherever I am, my work is being done. Yes, in the material realm, we have mainstream systems of assessing success, but just that fulfillment within, that my greatest responsibility is to remind myself I'm a spark of the divine and I'm here to transmit love and light. Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. Just aware of the time, we have a couple of minutes left. So I just want to invite Amena or Om, is there anything that you feel hasn't been spoken yet that you want to share? If you're complete, that's fine also.
Is there, I was just remembering now, there was some reflections in the chat in Zoom. Do we wish to share that with everybody in Gaia? Oh,
Yeah, we have one more reflection from Ali. Hi, Ali.
yeah.
Who says, I think in some ways we have to unlearn the Western thinking that nothing happens unless the human has taken action. Yes, the anthropocentric view of the world, especially when it comes to the natural world. Other living things have intelligence as well. If we have to work that hard, then maybe we're not doing it right, which is, yes, one of the key foundations of nature. Nature doesn't work hard. Having said that, we're not living in a vacuum and we do face external pressures from systems that are the complete antithesis to the regenerative world we're trying to create. This is why we need to build not only our community, that we can support each other. We're not supposed to be doing this alone. No, for sure, we're not meant to be doing anything alone. We're meant to be living in a village. And as Amina's said, there's many different roles. There's a million different roles and a million different locations, and we need a million different solutions to all of the challenges we face. And it changes from location to location, right? That's the whole thing about localization. But yes, absolutely, we're not meant to be doing this alone. And we're stronger when we come together and we have a different instrument to play in this large orchestra. And that's a great reflection to end on. Thank you, Ali, for sharing. So we're at time now, and Amina, you do have a chant you wanted to play on the way out, but I think we maybe don't have time for that now. We'll put it in the resources.
Maybe we could just chant it together. I think Om might know this. Okay, let's just
No
close
pressure.
with a vibration of moving from, I know we are today working on holding strong emotions and the world suffering and everything that's happening in the world around us, the fires and yeah, the fires within and the fires outside. So let's just come into the space of the heart, our inner eco-village space. Let's tend to it with the resonance of this mantra together. So let's take a deep breath in together and exhale. We'll begin by chanting Om 3 times together, and then we'll transition into the closing chant. Om.
Finish the time.
Loka samasta sukhinu bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhinu bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhinu bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy, healthy, and free. May all beings everywhere be happy, healthy, and free. May all beings everywhere be happy, healthy, and free.
Thank you, dear Amina, for joining us and sharing and bringing this topic. It's been a very rich discussion. Thank you, everyone, Om, Kin, Kai, Note, everyone at Gaia Ashram. Good to see you and enjoy the rest of your journey together. Everybody online, Thank you for joining us. Feel free to unmute yourselves and say goodbye in whichever language you feel called. And we will share with you, because this community is very important to us online or in person, we'll share with you the next Eco Village talks and the next GENOA community calls so you can come back